there's more in the waiting room. There's more in the waiting room who will be admitted as fast as we can. So first of all, I have to, besides a number of apologies for people who couldn't make it, which I've already mentioned a minute ago, I have to apologize myself now. When we sent out our invitation for this meeting on the 3rd of February, most of you got an invitation with all the recipients an open copy, and the text in the message body was repeated 3 times as well when I scroll down. And that's not right, and that's what I'm apologizing for, because for privacy and to protect against spammers, all our ABC messages to our mailing list are addressed to me and Harm, with everybody else invisible in BCC. And that's what we tried to do on the 3rd as well. But somehow the gremlins in cyberspace were playing mischief. So next time better, nostra culpa. I'm sorry about that. I've also a couple of announcements. First of all, the intention is that after this dedicated meeting, which is dedicated to extensive grazing and conservation grazing, the next 2 ABC meetings will also be dedicated. And if all goes well, they will be about labeling nature-friendly produce with Natura 2000 or other brands. And the second one will be about farmland conservation easements or covenants as a tool to permanently secure biodiversity and landscape elements on farmland. And both these meetings will prepare our input for workshops which the ENPLC LIFE project, which is a joint project between Eurosite and the European Landowners Organization, is organizing in May and June. So these 2 dedicated meetings are going to be working towards an output. There's also work underway on a workshop coordinated by the RBP network about results-based payments, to which we are being asked to contribute. So hopefully more news about that in the coming weeks. And for 2 of our public webinars, the preliminary work has begun, the one on buffering water and landscapes, and the one on carbon farming. So again, I hope to be able to come up with some news in the weeks to come. And besides those who already dropped me a message about this in December, January, anyone else who'd like to pitch in and help with any of the webinars or dedicated meetings I just mentioned, just let me know in the chat or by email afterwards. And we're still planning to hold the first get-together, a jamboree as we call it, of nature-friendly farmers and conservation practitioners working together with them, to be held as a physical meeting as part of the Eurosite annual event, which is now scheduled for November in the north of France. So that's another work that's being taken in hand. So these are the announcements from my side. If anybody wants to, has anybody else got an announcement? You can put up your hand. Nope. Okay.
Anton?
Yes, Harm?
Can I do one announcement?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's that we're just planning the grazing study tour events for this year, and they might be relevant for some of you. So in 2 weeks from now, we have a webinar on natural grazing with people from the Netherlands and Poland. And then in May, the second week of May, we have the in-person grazing study tour in the Netherlands. So it's mostly about grazing with cattle and horses in low-lying areas of the Netherlands. So with experts, you will visit several areas in the Netherlands. And then in September, we have the grazing study tour, the version in Poland, in the north of Poland, visiting several national parks. Please keep an eye on the Eurosite website. On the event page, you will find more information on the program, and they might, you might find them interesting for you.
Okay, thanks, Harm. Okay, and now we start on our presentation. This presentation is about the Life in Common Land project in Galicia, in Spain. And it's about grazing, of course, and about how traditional grazing is being used to restore wet heaths and peaty soils. And well, without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Ramon Alberto Diaz, and to explain the project. Ramon, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for this invitation. Well, We are presenting today, myself from the University of Santiago, and also the coordinator from the University of Coruña, Professor Jaime Fagúndez. So we will do the presentation, the two of us, and on behalf of the whole group that worked in this project. Well, the main idea behind the project was to improve the conservation status of 3 Natura 2000 habitats in 11 common land communities. Here, the idea is that we are working with private properties, but they are not from a single owner, but from a community. So it allows us to expand the project to a wider area. The area comprises around 2,000 hectares of target habitats inside Natura 2000, and almost 10,000 hectares of these common land communities. And more or less the half of their surface is included inside the borders of these Natura 2000 areas. The period of this project started in 2018 and finished last December. So we are now presented somehow the end of the final conclusions of this project. That we want to, we have a kind of a follow-up in a new project that we are starting this year. In this case, this project, we were 3 partners, the province of Lugo and our 2 universities, University of Coruña and University of Santiago. And the main goals of this project was to develop and implement a management model based in conservation results that would be eventually led to a conservation result payment scheme at the end of the project. As was told, we want to improve, or if we can increase the area of these 3 target habitats that we'll be describing in a second, and to disseminate, of course, and transfer demonstrative management measures that we executed on this area. We would like also to enhance the public awareness about 2 key issues: the ecosystem services provided by these habitats, and also the role of the common land communities in keeping and increasing these ecosystem services. So a quick look to the habitats. Here we have 2, let's say, extensive habitats that were the wet heathlands and blanket bogs. And here I want to stress the fact that the blanket bogs are the relatively wide area of blanket bogs we have in this corner of the Iberian Peninsula is a relic of the habitat despite the fact that we are quite in a south position in Europe. And also we have another more locally distributed with less surface of the habitat of raised bogs. All the 3 are considered as priority habitats by Natura 2000. So I now give the floor to my colleague Jaime Fagúndez that will talk a little bit about traditional activities centered in the grazing.
Thank you, Ramon. Yes, so one of the main goals in the project was to identify and evaluate the impact of traditional activities in habitat conservation. So in these particular mountain areas, the main activities are related to livestock grazing, and the main ones are cattle grazing and also wild ponies management in the mountains. There are some sheep and goats, but those used to be important in the past, but they are very rarely found now. So, Ramon, can we go to next slide? Yes. So cattle grazing is the main where the commoners get the main profits. But ponies are important also in the mountains for them. But there is kind of a mixture between tradition that they like to maintain and the utility that they get from these ponies, as they are a very good tool to keep the vegetation under control. And that's how they explained that the ponies are good to maintain mainly gorse from encroachment in the in this particular habitat, mainly on the wet heathlands. So during the project, we evaluated the number of owners and the number of animals that they have in the mountains, and how they use these animals for profitability, and also for keeping the vegetation under control. In the next slide, yeah, we can see how the important role of wild ponies can be observed if we compare some of these areas which are grazed by ponies and others in which pony grazing is no longer in use. And so you can see in these two pictures on the left, the wild ponies has shaped the vegetation. The greener you see are gorse shrubs. In those areas, there are no ponies. The problem there is that, well, we have shrub encroachment, which means that there is more accumulation of biomass, which may pose a risk for wildfires. But especially it's a problem for them, as these areas are the cattle does not feed on gorse as ponies do, and so that limits constrains the use of the land by the cattle. So we share this interest with the owners and the farmers, in the sense that we believe ponies are good for conservation, or are good, healthy heathlands, and they also think that the ponies are good to maintain the pastures. So next slide, please. Yeah, so there's a bunch of literature and let's say evidence that states that ponies have a positive effect on this particular habitat, mainly on wet and dry heaths. They show the highest numbers in terms of species diversity and interactions, and also to keep some of the most sensitive species on shrublands. And they do so because they keep the structure of the vegetation. You can see on the left those mats with some gaps in between, and that's the particular shape of the heathland that the ponies maintain. So we rely on these evidences to promote the presence of ponies in the area, and in that we have we are very much in line with the interest of the farmers as well. So next one, please. So within the project, we did several things. We use GPS collars to track and understand the social behavior of the ponies, how they perform in the mountains, and also understanding what's the traditional management from interviews that we had with the owners. So we learned several things, like what's the number of animals that regularly form a band size, which is somewhere in between 6 and 31 ponies. And these bands have like an average home range of about 250 hectares. And so you can see these maps down here where we show the home range that the ponies use, and by its side the core areas where they stay for at least 50% of the records from the GPS. So you see they kind of sectorize the areas and use they arrange these bands on the territory that they are not completely territorial because there is some overlapping, but they do well in using all resources in the mountain. And they also have during the season different uses of the mountain areas. In the summer, they commonly go higher up the mountain and use the blanket bogs more. And in the winter, they use the lower areas, mainly the wet heats. And a good thing that we got from, as I said, from the interviews is that the owners are quite happy with the performance by the ponies because they help to keep pastures in a good condition for cattle grazing. If you can go to next one. Yeah, so, but there are many conflicts, and there's these traditional practices are being abandoned, let's say, and they claim there are several problems related to this. There's a clear bias towards problems related to wolf attacks. So wolves prey mainly on ponies in these areas. That's the main prey for wolves. And the problem with that, well, there are several issues, but one of them is that it's really hard to find the carcasses after the attacks. And if you don't find them and they are properly inspected, you won't get the compensation back. So that's one of the main issues. And then there are others related to bureaucracy, regulations, administration. The ponies now have to be microchipped, and well, that's not like a big issue for them, but it's something that adds up to the problems. And then there's the Common Agricultural Policy, which has several different issues, but one of them is related to the eligibility of shrublands and how the effective area is calculated, which leaves out all shrubs. So the coefficients go down, and well, payment gets lower. And then the number of animals there are that per area, where ponies weigh the same as cows, and yeah, and some owners prefer to have more cows and less ponies, and that's another reason to get rid of them. And then the ponies are sold for meat, but this market is quite low. There's only a local market, and prices are quite low, so they don't have any incentives to keep these practices. Yep. Ramon, will you continue?
Yes, thank you very much. So now I think I will, or we will try to explain some other general ideas in the project, but always keeping behind the idea of this, the importance of the extensive grazing in the whole project. So main drivers of all the actions of the efforts of these projects project was to involve, of course, the common land communities, the landowners as main stakeholders in the area, putting together the scientific and traditional knowledge and even introducing new technologies in the management, and of course, promoting this traditional management, this grazing that was previously explained by Jaime. A kind of workflow of the whole project. Okay, we have a group of preparatory actions, and then from the information gathered by these preparatory actions, we can design and execute conservation demonstrative actions, which could be a bit, let's say, small in area, but we think that the effect will be larger as an example that could be reproduced in other places and other times. We have also as the core of this project a result-based payment for conservation and a scheme for payment for conservation at the final stages of the project, and a program of monitoring the actions and the conservation state of the influence in the conservation of the state of these monitoring actions, and also a program for monitoring the conservation state for the design for the distribution of the budget of these result-based payments for conservation. Of course, we have also a program for increase the awareness on these topics and the dissemination of knowledge and transference and training of the people or potential users of the knowledge developed by this project. So a couple of words of preparatory actions. Jaime has already told us about some preparatory actions directly linked to the grazing or the grazing knowledge, the grazing design of the actions from the grazing point of view. And yes, we have at the beginning to develop an accurate, precise, and updated mapping and evaluation of conservation state of the habitats. We made this by photo interpretation, remote sensing analysis, and so. And from this knowledge, we managed to derive a simple conservation state indicator set that we summarized in these cards or files that could be easily interpreted in the field, either from technicians and also from landowners. All this information allowed us to make the diagnosis of the habitat conservation state that will be eventually used also for the derivation of a result-based management model for conservation. This model will be eventually integrated in the forest management plan for each one of the 11 land communities in the area. The idea here is that this forest management plan, according to the regulation of our region, is not only aiming at the woodland, but also extensive grazing areas like the areas that we have here. So what we try to do here is to integrate biodiversity criteria, biodiversity administration instruments in a more general and generally accepted instrument for land use management planning, okay? So this was one of the shortcuts that we tried to use for introducing all these good practices, all these advices for conservation, also the administrative requirements or constraints in the management of the area. So this is eventually the distribution of the areas with accepted or almost accepted or approved, sorry, by the administration. This area is still in the final stage of approval by the administration, but it will be in short time. And only one of the common areas did not succeed in presenting and approve this forest management plan, and it was basically, I have to say, because an internal administrative problem of this community. They changed it in the middle of the project the government of the community, so it somehow stacked all the previous agreements and previous work, and I think they will be finally approved it, but unfortunately unfortunately not in the span of the time span of the project. So as main highlights of these preparatory actions, we have all the detailed mapping, we have the evaluation. Luckily, most of the area was evaluated as a more or less favorable conservation state, and we have all the results of these surveys and interviews with commoners and wild pony owners. And it will eventually, some of this information led to this report that was already described by Jaime. Other highlights, of course, this result-based management model for conservation and a specific silviculture model for conservation. It was quite innovative because finally we managed to design a model for that could be used, exported to other communities around the region, based on grazing and conservation. Okay, we eventually have these 10 forest management plans approved or almost approved, and this set of indicators previously described. Yeah, this model allowed us to design and finally approve and execute the result-based payments for conservation with this amount of money per year per hectare. And yeah, I don't know, I cannot point with the pointer. Okay, but you can see in the table on the corner, on the left, sorry, right down corner. And these are the amounts per hectare and year, and we put together 3 years at the end of the project. And these are the numbers. In this case, I would like to call your attention on this, what is in Spanish, importe adicional. Here we try to put a bonus on these areas that are actively doing conservation actions. As in other meetings with people from this network for payment for conservation, advise that not to rely only on these payments, but combine them with other more traditional, let's say, conservation actions. Okay, now I give the floor again to my colleague Jaime Fagundes, who is going to tell us about details of the conservation actions.
Yeah, so we also performed several direct conservation actions, and so these were divided in 3 main groups, including livestock management and how we try to improve the habitats by getting better practices in livestock management on these habitats. Then we did some actions on correction of several issues related to the hydrology and erosion problems from infrastructures on the area. And we also restored several areas which were covered by afforestation from non-native species. So to do this, we met the commoners and tried to get a consensus on which actions they were interested in, and met the criteria that we had, and the focus on habitat conservation. And from those areas, there's then the bureaucratic things related to the permits that we need from the administration and so on. And finally, once we get everything set, we were able to perform these actions. So there are several things here. If you can see from pictures on the left, the use of ponies, which for us is the best conservation tool that we have, and we try to support as much as possible the pony owners to keep their animals on the heathlands. Some actions related to these hydrological problems from different infrastructures that we found there. Then some down here, you may see the fencing, some temporal fencing to restore mainly peatland areas, and yeah, and then some others related to, for example, to watering places for the animals to avoid cattle going massively into the peatlands, and avoiding as much as possible the erosion of these areas. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, and just as an example, this is one of the main actions that we did, and we are very proud of, because it worked out really well. We restored a large area of blanket bog, which was covered by Scots pine plantation, which was done during the 1960s all over the area. And so for this particular action, we had to build a slide that you can see in that picture from Cesar. And we use animal traction from colleagues, which use these horses to move the felled trees, and they were all grouped into big packs, and then those were brought up with a cable using the slide to mainly to avoid any impact on the vegetation and the peat. And it worked out quite well, and you may find a video on this action in YouTube. So if you just click in there and look for Life in Common Land, you'll see, well, there are a few videos, but there's one on this particular action. Okay, can we go next slide? Yeah, so those are the numbers of how many hectares were improved from each of the different actions. So we did this temporal fencing in several areas. We did shrub clearing, mainly. That's an action that is followed by ponies getting into the area and, let's say, finishing the work. And control burning, we did not perform this. We've had some problems related to permits and well, for other reasons. This one was we didn't do it. And some actions related to, as I said, infrastructure, watering sites, topographic corrections, and then for C3, tree felling for these non-native species, mainly Scots pine in this area, and some exclusions to promote the recovering of the vegetation in that particular area. So there's 30 direct conservation areas with a total area of around 400 hectares improved. We can go to the next one. Yeah, so those are the numbers for each of the three priority habitats, which were the target from the beginning. So we improved the 40-20, the wet heaths of Erica macayana, and you can see there on those pictures Gentiana nomonante or Ceratula tinctoria, which are sensitive species related to that habitat. The blanket bogs, we recovered 193 hectares. You can see Carex duriewi there, which is an endemic species from our blanket bogs. And then raised bogs, which is the area is very much reduced, but we still improve the a large area of 16 hectares. And next one, we can see, yeah, that's a map of the area and some details on, well, the area in which we actually worked, and then what we call the influenced area, which was we consider as an improvement because well, those direct actions also influence the larger area than just the the particular conservation action site. And yeah, thanks, Ramon.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to, well, to finish with the presentation. I think we are a bit tight on time, talking about the monitoring of the project actions and the project itself. As previously mentioned, we integrated the photo interpretation with the remote classical remote sensing techniques on images from satellite, from drones or RPAS, and from LiDAR. And we combined all this knowledge with all the data retrieved on the field on several plots and measures. Here the idea was that the satellite remote sensing was used to draw the big picture of the area, for instance, detecting or making a kind of early warning system for detecting major changes in the vegetation cover that could imply certain destabilization or problems in the vegetation. And the drone monitoring was more pointing at particular areas, small areas where, for instance, some conservation action was done, and we have to monitor if the evolution of the habitat is what should be or not. And we have also these permanent plots aiming at the monitoring of species composition and structure, and also the evolution or the difference in the biomass amount on the field. Some highlights, apart from all the knowledge derived from these permanent plots and remote sensing analysis. Maybe the most original thing here was that we executed 4 campaigns of flights, and we registered more than 1,000, almost 1,700 hectares covered by the images captured by these drones, using also in the last campaigns LiDAR sensors. It allowed us to make a quite detailed and spatially explicit monitoring of the evolution of the vegetation cover before and immediately after the actions, and also in the short time of 3, 4, 2 years that we have from the end of the action evolution, the further evolution of the habitats, and of course make a kind of diagnosis of this behavior and evolution. We also monitored the project actions from ecosystem services viewpoints, making some reports according to several methodologies, including the INVEST methodology. And of course, all this thing of the public awareness and dissemination. We have this webpage that we encourage you to visit and to take a look to some of the things, of the products that we have already talked about. We have worked in social networks and making different kind of visits to schools for making conference, trying to involve the young people in the conservation. And we also made a card game with that you can play, including information about the habitat species in the area. And we have also done several acts for stakeholder training and knowledge sharing, like workshops, meeting, courses, and so, and replication and result transference actions. And here I would like to stress the importance of moving people for traveling from this region, from this area with these problems, with these issues, to another area where they have somehow similar conservation and land management problems, and to see how that they are not alone in the world, that there are other people with the same problems, with the same possibilities of improve their quality of life and to keep going. Yeah, highlights. You have some numbers about the people that we managed to reach with all this dissemination, and we also want to announce that we have recently published the Layman report on the LIFE project that you can download from the webpage. Some final remarks, maybe in addition to the ones that Jaime has already told us. We can discuss, maybe you find interesting to discuss about some questions that we understood. We understand that they are quite important about the socio-ecological system, the area considered as a socio-ecological system from the viewpoint of this conceptual model that is somehow summarized here, where we have an ecosystem or a group of ecosystems in a delicate balance that between management and conservation, and in the limits of the tolerance, of the resilience of the habitat, this ball moves up and down in a more or less dynamic but equilibrium or balance. If we move towards the land abandonment, or on the other direction, towards identification or overuse of the habitats, we can move this habitat to a undesirable conservation state that in some cases could be reversible. It can be shifted back to this dynamic balance by actions like the ones that we try to make in this project, or in other cases it's too late. Some key issues also that came back from this report, from these questionnaires that we made, in addition to the previously told by Jaime, addressing questions like the opinions about Natura 2000 network, the perception of the cultural ecosystems or services or other kind of provision, regulation services. Could be that in general, the people recognize it, or at least at the beginning of the project, there is a need for the improve the information, to improve the content and the channels for transferring the information to the land owners. Also, there is a general overall negative view about the Natura 2000, what the Natura 2000 is doing for them. And actually, one of the ideas or requirements that we are now trying to implement in our current project is the possibilities of add a value on their products because they are produced in an area that is actively conservation biodiversity. Also, there is a kind of blame to the administration on all the bureaucracy barriers in getting permissions, in getting overcome the legal constraints for doing things in the land, to make transformations, to clear areas, and so that should be improved as well, should be solved somehow. And finally, we detect that it's really, really important to actively include the local knowledge in all the stages of the design of any project, like the project we did during this 5, 7, 8 years in the area, because it's a way to somehow empower and increase the self-perception of the owners in all the activities, and to involve them actively in the conservation of the area. But yeah, I have to say that this was more or less the opinion at the beginning, at the previous questionnaires, and we have also finished recently with the end of project questionnaire, and we hope that some of these bad impressions about conservation of the biodiversity would be at least improve a little bit in this after these 5 years of project. And I think it's time for discussion, and thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Right, muchísimas gracias, Jaime and Ramon, for this very interesting presentation. In the chat already quite several questions. couple apparently have been answered in the chat, but there's still some open questions. And I would like to ask my question, first of all. I guess it's the chair's privilege. Ponies, as you said, are extremely important for the conservation of the area, for the management of the land. It almost sounds as if the whole system will collapse if the ponies disappear. At the same time, you've said that the prices for pony meat are very low for horse meat. So that's a problem. So if you want this to continue, the farmers, the commoners need to get a good income. What could you do to stimulate the consumption of horse meat in Spain or even or in other countries, so that they can get a better price for the meat and be stimulated to continue holding ponies on the land? Is there anything you can do to increase the market for pony meat, horse meat?
Yeah, thanks, Anton. Yes, so we believe there is a strong link between the population of wild ponies and the habitat quality status of especially the wet heathlands, and so that seems to be quite clear. And yeah, there is a problem with the ponies, the meat market prices, but we would like to highlight the importance, the ecological importance as a tool for conservation of these ponies. So we think one indirect measure is using this payment scheme on conservation status of the habitats, because the owners already know that the ponies are the best tool that they can have to keep these habitats in a good condition. So there was a question about the indicators. So we use the vegetation structure, roughly explain. There is a set of indicators, but if you focus on the vegetation structure and this balance between grass and shrubs, and within the shrubs between heathers and gorse, and by using this, it's a good proxy to evaluate habitat quality. And it's quite, as Ramon said, it's quite, let's say, easy to evaluate even from non-experts. But it also matches what the farmers say about the good condition of the habitats. So we have we both interests meet there. So yeah, we should. That's what we would highlight. And about the products from the meat products, we have some ideas on how to promote. Like maybe they need a brand for these particular animals, which are doing their job on the mountain, keeping on conservation, and that brand could be a way to, let's say, improve the profits from those animals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I remember one of the last slides you even mentioned what I understood to be a possibility of using the Natura 2000 label, for instance, as a brand.
Yeah, for sure. It's I think it's an idea we want to develop somehow in our current project. This thing of the labels, but there is still work to be done because it's a bit tricky. A single label, more dedicated label to one particular product or group of products. So it has to be designed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And just another minor question that Jaime is very familiar with this, that we know that it's a slow process, but we want to somehow promote the consumption of this meat by doing or including in some events, like popular events like fairs and things like that, some cooking show or things like that, trying to promote the consumption, at least locally or for people or tourists coming to promote the consumption of this meat. But it's local scale, and it's really a slow process.
Okay, right. I'm going through the questions in the chat. Bogdan had a question about. Bogdan, would you like to unmute and ask your question directly, or shall we just read it out from the chat? Okay. Can you, Jaime Ramon, can you see the question in the chat? It's from Bogdan. It should be a tradition. His question is: it should be a traditional fire used for pasturing. Any information on the former use? Is his question.
Yeah. So, yeah, Ramon, please.
No.
Thank you, Anton. Sorry,
Jaime. Can I interrupt? Ramon, could you please stop sharing your screen? Then we can see each other.
Sure.
Thank you.
So yes, we had some feedback from the commoners and how they used to use control burning as a management tool, but it's rarely used now, and partly because here in Galicia, in general, in Spain, we have a big problem with wildfires, and so the administration is quite reluctant to give permission to this. And so in this project, we didn't perform any of these controlled fires. We wanted to at least to evaluate the result, and but there was one just previous to our project, and there was a bad experience with it because that fire just came out of control, and so that we decided it wasn't a good idea to perform any of this during the project. Right, Ramon?
Yeah, okay. I'm maybe more prone to this kind of prescribed fires. But yeah, indeed, it's as Jaime said, it's a controversial issue because you can somehow mix up this prescribed fire with wildfires that are a real and serious problem in Galicia. And yeah, it has to be done in a proper way and by professionals, let's say. And for this, you have to move to make an agreement with administration, all the permissions and things like that. Actually, there is, if correct me if I'm wrong, but there is only one of the communities, of the landowner communities, that is using actively this fire. And okay, for them works more or less well, with the exception of this last event that unfortunately, after some days after the controlled burn, appeared a wildfire in the area. So yeah, it's a tool, but in this area could be used, but it has to be done with very carefully, because we have all these speeds, and you know, here in this area of southern Europe, sometimes the pit is not as well or saturated in water as in other places in the north of Europe or in the Atlantic facade. So it has to be done very carefully. Yeah.
So Anton, I see a question about wolves, and so I just want to say that yes, wolves are a big issue here in Spain. Well, here in the Sistral Mountains and other places in Galicia as well, but it's mainly if you ask the farmers, they are very much concerned, and it's the main problem that they always mention. And in a way, it's a matter of perspective that they think that the administration should do something, and in a way, they blame the administration for this problem. So yeah, it's a big issue for us, mainly because it's their main concern, and it's something that always comes out every time we have a meeting with them or anything. It's wolves. It's the first problem for them.
Okay, and now there are yes, Alexia, I see your hand is up. But there's also questions from Cas who should. get a turn. I think we'll take Kostas' questions first and then you, Alexei, okay? Gus, are you there? Can you unmute yourself, because you can ask your questions in one go. It's probably easier than.
Yeah. What would happen if the ponies would not be there with regard to biodiversity? And you showed also one picture. Without ponies, it is greener.
Yeah.
Well, simply said, but then I should walk around there. When it is greener, there is more biodiversity.
Not quite.
Exactly.
Well, at least not in this, not in this particular system, because the green that you saw were gorse. Gorse, it's linked to lower biodiversity in general. And what would happen? So the natural succession works on this particular system by shrub cover increases and much biomass scrub, and then finally you would have a forest eventually. But yeah, so that's why we say that these heathlands are semi-natural vegetation, semi-natural habitats, because they require these low levels of management, or at least the presence or the performance of large herbivores like ponies, or mainly ponies.
We have to keep in mind that in the lowlands, at least where the gorse could grow up very quickly, believe us, you will have this process of nitrogen capture. And we are here in a habitat characterized by the low nutrient content. So it's also dangerous from this point of view. Maybe in the highlands, where in the blanket box area is not as relying on the management on the grazing, but we also have checked that in some areas, in some transitions, it could be less diverse if you have less ponies grazing in the area. We have all this hot issue of the Molinia, of the purple burgrass, I think, Molinia cerulean, that could spread around.
Good. I think we have to speed up a little, because we're reaching the halfway mark and we still have to discuss the grazing manifesto. And but there are three hands up, so I'll give them the floor. Alexei, you were first, then Bill Grace, and then Henk Singstra. Alexei?
Yeah, thanks. I will not show myself anymore. I did to prove that I am not a robot, but connection is better when there is no video. There is a couple of questions. I understand we're a bit in a hurry, but still it's bloody interesting. One is to continue my written question about species. I understand that you mostly use the habitat structure as the success indicator, but you did show some plant species characteristic to area that to me looked perfectly as the species that usually are dependent on grazing. They were mostly short and typical for looked like grazing dependent species. Of course, we have different ones in these northern parts. But then what about animals? Do you have info of insects, for example, dependent on grazing of these habitats? You usually have them, but usually there is not much data. What about amphibia, or is it too high for them in the mountains? What about reptiles, and especially what about birds? And with birds, there is an additional question on top of grazing. Has anyone assessed the impacts of all these wind parks on bird populations in these grazed highlands? I'm afraid there might be some, but probably again, maybe there is not much data. And finally, a question follow up on wolves. Is it mainly hazard for the last remaining sheep farmers, or are they really a serious hazard for horses and cattle as well? From Estonian experience, I would say that wolves are serious hazard for sheep, but we have sometimes killing of cattle, but they are quite rare. So that's it from me. Thanks in advance.
Yeah, if I can answer the first and maybe Jaime the second. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, yeah, we were concerned about the importance of the species animal, apart from plants, of course, that's our specialty. But yeah, we consider these communities of animals as part of the habitat. So if we keep in a functional and good state the habitat, we assume that some of the key species there, that of course there are more or less, let's say, happy. And but unfortunately, a detailed survey on the animal species is a bit beyond our scope and our possibilities in this project. But yeah, we have contacted with different experts, and all this thing of the bugs of the carabids in the that need some areas of bear pit. We try to keep all this stuff in mind, and we also contacted some experts in amphibian, in reptiles, related to some of the fencing, the temporal fences that Jaime already mentioned for conservation. And the windmills, yeah, of course it's a problem. All this infestation of windmills there for basically for big birds like the vultures and things like that. From time to time they crash against the mills and they die, of course. So yeah, there's a problem, but again, it's a bit beyond our scope here.
Yeah, and about the wolves, I see my colleague Laura Lagos she's an expert in ponies, just answered, and so the ponies can be about 80% of the diet of wolves. So the main prey are ponies, but yeah, they kill sheep as well, and occasionally may kill cattle too. And yeah, about the first question, I agree that we would benefit from having more information on, you know, scientific based evidences for all sorts of groups of organisms like insects that you mentioned, and reptiles and amphibians and birds and so on. And yeah, that's another thing that we would encourage from this project, to get help from other teams on working on this, getting more scientific evidence to better adjust our indicators.
Good, thanks. Bill, your turn now for your question.
Thank you, Anton. It's more of a comment, really, and just to contrast the situation that has been described here, where cattle have retained their position in the hills, whereas here in UK, it's primarily sheep that dominate the upland livestock systems. And to some extent, I guess, we'd have to accept that wolves, the lack of them here, would be part of that story. But I don't think it should be the entire picture, because, of course, cattle would have had a much stronger place here for a long time, but they've been completely subsumed by the advances in the sheep sector. And I'd just be interested to hear the comments from the group about, you know, why it's so different. Just on top of that, in the Yorkshire Dales back in the early 2000s, there was a life fund project to encourage farmers to start putting cattle back in these upland areas, and that was very successful. You know, the minute that some money was found to help farmers acquire the infrastructure, buy the livestock, then they seemed much happier about the idea of moving their systems to a mixed grazing operation, and the results on the ground showed how beneficial it was. And I guess the question then is, what is available through LIFE or through CAP to facilitate that kind of thinking on the ground and maintain the system that you've got there? If the ponies could be funded through those external payments, then you wouldn't need to worry so much about securing a market for them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, well, the main difference between sheep and cattle and ponies are the shepherds. So here, at least, you need a shepherd to, you know, move the sheep around, and that's how it's always done. And probably that's the key issue is that you have less and less professional farmers and people living there and keeping track of their animals. So that's probably the why the sheep are not used anymore on those areas. And then there was a big change some decades ago when one new breed, which is the Rubia Galega, it's a large cow, which gives much profit. And I think it somehow changed the whole system, and everyone turned to focus more on that particular cow. Now, in some other, let's say, traditional breeds were lost, which were smaller cows, and well, that it also relates to the change of some areas to improve pastures. They transformed, that happened during the 80s, and yeah, there's probably several things that are acting together and to explain that.
Good.
There are some, sorry. I would like just to point out that there is not a market for wool, for instance, in Galicia. So you miss some of the multi-products that could be got from the ships are not used anymore. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Good.
And just to push home on that, Anton, this question of these external payments, either from CAP or through LIFE, do you think that would help the situation to stabilize it and remove these threats that the ponies might be removed?
So yeah, if we could encourage the owners to keep the ponies on the mountains by any system, which could be through the regional administration. We think that they are the ones responsible for conservation. That would be good. That would be good for them. But then it's quite complicated, because there are other problems, like the owners feel the wolves eat their animals and they don't like it. It's not about the money, or it's not only about the money. It goes beyond that, and it also relates to this traditional, you know, the feeling that they have, the identity.
Yeah, I understand. I'm a farmer too, but I see less difference between the wolves getting to eat the ponies than people ending up eating them. It's you could draw a parallel there.
Okay, but now we have to move on. Henk, I mean, yours was an extra question. And Martin, I see that you've got your hand up as well, but we really have to move on to the next item on the agenda, the manifesto. Martin, if you can you? I'll give you the floor, but please make it a very short question and a very short answer too, please. Henk?
Yes. Thank you, Anton. Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion, and the issues being discussed about the future of traditional extensive farming are quite common everywhere. And it would be very interesting to visit the area actually, and to have the next grazing study tour organized to Galicia and see how things are in reality. So
you're invited. You're all invited.
Thank you. But there's one specific question which was all the time in my mind is your 3 priority habitats are including raised bogs and blanket bogs, and then ponies grazing on these habitats is something we would not do here in this part of Europe because of the trampling and because of the disturbance that horses and ponies do to this very, very vulnerable habitat. So I'm curious whether that is not the issue and why it is not an issue in your area.
Actually, somehow it is, but in some kinds of the scientific community. But I suppose it depends on the grazing pressure and the grazing planning. I think Jaime and his colleagues has good studies on the effect of this species and on the permanence of the horses on the different seasons of the year. So I think it's a question of management, and I suppose that since we have evidence of the presence of horses there for centuries, and they managed to keep more or less in good conservation state the habitat, I think it's a strong argument supporting this management.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree that there are some problems related to cattle when there are a lot of cows, but not to ponies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Martin, are you still there? Your question, and then this really is the last one, and then I will move to the next item.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everybody. I just would like to say that we have quite the same problem in our region, of also Galicia in Polish language. Historically, here was more sheep. Now it's going. There are more cows, but also there are a problem with because it was milk dairy cows, and there are less and less farmers and farms, and we have also some kind of project with about the biodiversity. But it's very interesting. It was very interesting presentation, and I think that we can be in touch to maybe find some things what works in practical. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, that's also what Henk was saying about it. I mean, that's the whole point also of these meetings, is to bring people in touch with each other. And if you want to contact each other and you haven't got the email address, just let me know, because I have all the email addresses. I can and just make sure I'll be the middleman. But yeah, that's excellent, these bilateral contacts.